Larian Studios are the most hated company in the video game industry. Not by the players, but by the executives at the other video game publishers. Larian basically represent what they hate most, which is a world where video games have a focus on fun, entertainment, quality, integrity, being of value to the player and providing a wholesome, long-term experience that you can continue to go back and enjoy without having to spend more and more money like you do in most 2024 mainstream games, full of microtransaction, battle passes, live services, all of that sort of crap. And it is great to see that Larian themselves, they are starting to call out the AAA space. They're calling out their peers, the companies that basically rip off their players and also treat their employees quite poorly as well. Now, there is some nuance there. I don't really believe that when you lay off staff at a video game company, it's automatically evil and, oh my goodness, the company's first priority should be to keep everyone employed. I don't think that's always responsible. I think there is a balance there where game companies or any company, they do have to do what's best for the business. But in my view, that should be doing what's best for the business long term. If you're laying a bunch of people off just to make this quarter look good and generate some quick money, but it's at the detriment of the entire business long term, I don't really see that as a good thing. But sometimes layoffs are inevitable. So I just want to mention that nuance. Not every company is evil because they need to lay people off. Sometimes it needs to happen because those jobs aren't required. And it's actually a disservice to the people who still work there if they don't perhaps lay people off in circumstances. Because if the company's not doing well, you can't just put everyone's job at risk by keeping people on, paying them when they're not required, if maybe the business isn't doing so well financially. So just something to keep in mind. But Michael Douse, the director of publishing at Larian, he's commented on the current mass layoffs that are sweeping the video game industry, and he's described them as an avoidable fuck-up. Douse accuses that the layoffs are happening one after the other because the companies see it as an opportunity to maximize profits. Who could have seen that coming? But to prevent these giant operational failures that we call layoffs, they are an avoidable fuck-up. That's really all they are. And yeah, again, it comes down to, are all of these layoffs happening? And there's been loads of them. Microsoft, especially when they bought Activision Blizzard out. Sony, of course, EA, pretty much all these major companies, they've had heaps of layoffs, heaps of team members. Now, I think lots of people get hopeful that it's all the HR managers, all the people who aren't really involved in the development of the game who are being let go. And some people go, yep, that's great, who needs those people? It's kind of like the community managers sticking DEI in everything, and you sort of go, hey, you're not even involved in the making of the game. Go away, you provide literally zero value, piss off. So there is that side of it, but I'm pretty sure it's clear that a lot of actual developer roles are being lost too. Some people will say it's the COVID boom now that that's all over and the gaming industry isn't quite as big, or at least it's not growing as much as people thought. That's part of the reason for the layoffs, but some are even saying it's because they know, these companies know AI tools are going to be around the corner that will do a lot of these development jobs. So if they let people go now, then the tools become available. Oh, let's do it. Let's not hire new people. Let's just use the AI tools, and our businesses of a size where we can get the most out of them without sort of paying a bunch of unnecessary wages. So it could be part of it, the whole AI angle. I will say though, what I really think it is, most likely, is just the short-term gains of these companies. So as we see, we come to the end of a quarter, these game companies, the EAs and so on, they just want to maximize profits by any means necessary. And if they can get a bunch of people off the books, fire a bunch of people, then suddenly those books are looking much better, a lot more profitable in many cases. The issue I see with that though, and I guess there's kind of two extremes to this. So one extreme is, well, if they're laying these people off and they're maximizing profits for shareholders, that's great. They need to do that. It's their responsibility to maximize those profits and do best by the business. That's kind of one extreme where they're doing the right thing. And then the other extreme would be capitalism's bad, business is evil. If we got rid of all this, we'd just have incredible creative games. They'd be made in a commune somewhere, a paradise, and everything would be great. I don't really believe either of those extremes. The reason for the first one, the whole, oh, they're doing the best by the shareholders, maybe, but only in the short term. What we see so often, say Bobby Kotick at Activision, basically fucking up Call of Duty, That's a game with huge name recognition that heaps of normies buy every single year, kind of like FIFA, just because of the name. It's popular, they know their friends are playing it, and they'll just buy it every 12 months, and that's it. That might even be the only game that they even play. But part of it is for the quality control. You know what you're getting, and people are kind of used to it. The issue is that sometimes the Bobby Koticks, these companies, they can get a little bit too greedy, where they know people are going to buy the game based on name alone. So that means that they can literally deliver a turd on a plate, and they know people are going to buy it again, which is what we got with the latest iteration, Modern Warfare 3, where it is literally garbage. It's basically a DLC that they extended into a full game because they wanted to charge the full box price. They looked at the analytics, the data that told them people would buy it. But the issue is, you do that, and sure, some normies, they won't care. They'll play it for their usual 2 or 3 hours and never play it again. A lot of people are like that with games. Not everyone finishes them. Look at the achievement completion for most games. It's very, very low. But then there will be some people who will notice. Word of mouth will spread around about how bad the game is. And often bad word of mouth, it filters through to the normies, even if they're not really going online doing their research. We've seen that with Star Wars, for instance. People talk about how bad it is, the box office numbers, they shrink because the perception is it's not very good anymore. It happens with games as well. Negativity filters through, kind of like Cyberpunk, for instance. So what will happen is if negativity around Call of Duty gets so bad, then next year's entry, this year's, whenever it's coming out, it's not going to sell as well. And slowly profits will dwindle, and eventually you don't really have a brand, the Call of Duty name anymore. Now, will that happen? I don't really know, but it has happened with many other brands. Bobby Kotick and Activision, they enacted that scheme to make very short-term profits. And I'm sure it worked out for Bobby. He knew he was going to get his golden parachute from Microsoft. What does he care about the health of the Call of Duty name? But you could definitely argue that he wasn't doing the best thing by the business and the best thing for shareholders in the long term. It was best for them at the time. I'm sure there's nuances there, but hopefully you get what I mean. So you can be pro-business and all of that, and still criticize these sorts of decisions, because, say, Nintendo, they are very pro-business, pro-money. That's really what they care about. And yet Mario, Zelda, quality control has always been a focus, and it's not because they're generous and they're happy to waste money to make it better because they've got a big passion for games, and I'm sure they do as well. But it's because they know that those names are so important. And you buy a Mario game, you know it's going to have that quality, that seal of approval, and you're going to have a good time. Whereas if they released a bunch of shovelware Marios one after the other, people would still buy them right now because they trust Nintendo. But eventually you would kill the Mario name, and you wouldn't have Super Mario Brothers at the box office making $1 billion because no one would care about the IP anymore. So it's kind of two ways to do it. They're both very pro-business, but one is looking at the long term, where the Call of Duty strategy right now is not looking at the long term. And that leads to these layoffs, because if you do tarnish your IPs and your name because you're shoving microtransactions in everything, you're destroying the quality control, you're rushing games out, there's performance problems, no one can play, the servers don't work, whatever it might be, the next time you release a game, you're not going to get as many sales. Now, most of the executives who've destroyed the IP names and all of that, they've long moved on, so they don't care. But the people who are there now, the shareholders who are there right now, they're going to suffer. So I can see what he means by saying it's an avoidable fuck-up, because it kind of is. If you're just focused on the long term, things might work out for you. Baldur's Gate 3, sure, it could have been more profitable by shoving in microtransactions, but by doing such a good job, their next game is going to sell humongously, even if it's a new IP, and then they can be building brands. They're not tied to the Dungeons & Dragons name anymore. They won't have to do that sort of stuff. And on the opposite side, Hasbro could farm out Baldur's Gate 4 to any useless studio, and I bet they could make a killing from people who'll just buy it on the name alone. So producing a great game, that is going to produce so many money-making opportunities going forward, and you won't need these layoffs because you're building a sustainable foundation of growth when you're making these good products. He goes on to say here, that's why you see one after the other, because companies are going, well, finally, now we can too. We can lay people off as well. We've wanted to do it for ages. Everyone else is, so why don't we? That's really kind of sick. And yeah, I guess what he's saying is, if Sony see Microsoft laying people off, EA see Sony laying people off. It's sort of a domino effect where if you do it all at once, these companies all lay people off, then who can you point the finger at? You can point at the industry, but who is that? Who represents that? No one, basically. So the companies kind of get away from the negative publicity. And again, that kind of points to the short-term gains, because if it just seems like an industry trend to lay people off, it might seem like a smart business decision. If Microsoft's doing it, this is clearly the way to go. The industry, you can't have this many bodies working on everything. There's not going to be that huge growth unless you can make these games with maybe smaller teams. Whereas if one company, if say only Sony laid people off and no one else did, it might be a sign of weakness that Sony aren't doing so well internally. So there could be some logic to that. And it mentions here, Douse noted that Larian Studios plan to avoid this by not taking the company public, claiming if they did it, it would be antithetical to the quality part of what we're trying to do. And that makes sense because, again, these companies are making money, but if they're private, they can often look at the long term. It's like Steam, everyone's favorite game company, let's be real. Steam is private and it has allowed them to focus on the customer and build a long-term foundation that worked. I can guarantee you that when Steam originally started, when was it, like early 2000s? If they were a public company, they may not even have been able to do that because the PC market was basically dead. No one had any confidence. Even Microsoft, who developed Windows, they were ditching anything on PC and going all in on the Xbox until they came crawling back. Epic Games did the same thing. They chased Gears of War money on the Xbox, and they came crawling back with the Epic Store and all of that sort of crap later when it was a proven market. But because Valve were private, they could make their own decisions, and they hedged their bets, and they thought, let's focus on building the PC market. It's going to take time, but this could work. The PC is an incredible open platform, and they succeeded. So it does prove that with long-term planning, you might not make all the money immediately, but eventually you will if you make smart decisions. And that's the benefit of staying private, which Larian is planning to do as well, which is great. If they ever went public, it would be the death of them, let's be real. And he elaborates here, so it wouldn't make our games better to go public. It would just make us rush. Yes, they would have to rush their games to meet these deadlines and ensure that the line keeps going up for the shareholders. If you asked us what Baldur's Gate 3 would look like, how much it would cost, and how it would feel 3 years ago, I wouldn't know. We just took it day by day. Interesting. So it sort of sounds like, I'm sure they had a plan. They're a very well-managed team. But because they are private, there is flexibility there where they can sort of go, you know what, we want to do this cool thing in the game. And unfortunately, that is going to delay the game a little while from a full release. It's going to take a bit longer than we planned. But because they're using their own funds, they obviously have a publisher and they had Hasbro, but they had that flexibility there. They could make their own decisions. If they were beholden to shareholders and other companies who own them and so on, maybe they have to get permission. And these people who they get permission from go, no, we need this game out now. We don't care about your feature. We don't care about the creativity. It's money, let's do it. But Larian can make that long-term decision to go, we want to do this cool feature. We know it will set our game apart. And that could lead to long-term sales, positive word of mouth. So it's a good thing. They seem to recognize it. We scoped up based on what we thought we would need and created reserves and fallbacks, just in case we would have to. Luckily, we don't have to. We're just nimble. Being nimble as a game company is key. Big companies are not nimble. Very true. It's like Microsoft. There was all this excuse making about, oh, we couldn't cancel Redfall even though it was so bad. We knew it was bad, but we couldn't do it. Let's be honest, trying to cancel that game, the amount of meetings, the amount of processes, red tape, it's probably all too much. It was easier to deliver a total dud. And then you've got Starfield as well, where it's like so many meetings, people talking to each other. You've got to go to your manager, they go to their manager, they've got to go up the chain. All of that because no one can just sit down, have a real conversation and say, this game sucks, we need to make this fun. How do these companies make a good game? It's only possible with really, really tight leadership. Even at Larian, they've got hundreds of employees, I believe, and if at the top, if those people are not good at what they do, it's all going to fall over. Xbox, Phil Spencer, he seems like a clown. He has some good PR, and people seem to like him at the start because he was saying the right things. He hasn't delivered any good games. Always an excuse, oh no, but it was Bethesda, no, but it was the Halo studio. He's at the top. He's been screwing everything up, and you can see in Swen a quality leader who gets it right. he talks about the success of Power World as well, and about, hey, you took a bunch of mechanics that they knew people would like, made a game that was unbothered by what a game should be, weren't sort of tracing trends, looking at spreadsheets to decide how to make the game. Really fucking simple. It's not rocket science. Now, I'll be honest, I never really got into Power World. Just looking at it, it didn't really appeal to me, but it was obviously extremely popular. And I think it shows that successful games now, it's not going to come from generic marketing where you do a cool trailer and that sets everything off and everyone wants to buy it. There's really got to be a huge word of mouth campaign that propels a game to just massive success. And again, it filters through to the normies. If you have a big online community saying that Power World or Helldivers or Baldur's Gate 3 are fantastic, eventually that gets to the general public and they pick it up as well. Cyberpunk's another. I mean, it was essentially a new video game IP, but the hype was so big because of Witcher 3 that everyone went and bought it despite the issues. It still sold like 25 million copies. Deserved now because they fixed it, but that was even when it came out and was getting pretty middling reviews. So word of mouth is massive. You're not going to be able to cut it with some big marketing campaign where there's a set piece. That's not enough. You need people talking positively about the game for it to blow up. And that is why it has happened to even one-man indie projects that are out there. If people are saying it's good and it's taking hold, you can have a success on your hands. If you don't have the players, if they don't have your back, then if you've spent 300 million on a Spider-Man 2, you're still only going to sell 15, 20 million copies. It's not going to blow up like these other games. So that's something to think about. And some previous comments from Swen, the director of Baldur's Gate 3, were brought up as well, where he'd said, I've been fighting with publishers my entire life. I keep on seeing the same mistakes over and over. It's always the quarterly profits. The only thing that matters is the numbers. Again, the numbers are fine. It is that quarterly profit side of things that is the issue. Because if games are taking 5 years and you're thinking in quarters, 4 quarters a year, how does that even really work? It gets ridiculous. And that's when you do have layoffs that may not be necessary. Like I said, not against layoffs, but if they are only being done so you hit some quarterly target, it starts to look a bit questionable. It all looks a bit wobbly. A little bit like a Ponzi scheme where you take out the wrong domino and then it all comes sort of crashing down. So it's got to be about sustaining things long term. Again, build great IPs, long-term value. You don't even have to discount your games if you're delivering genuine quality, because people will want to buy them at full price, like a Baldur's Gate and Elden Ring, if they know they're going to be getting value for money. If it's just the latest Ubisoft trash, people are just going to wait for a discount, A, because they've gotten used to the discounts, and it never feels like it's worth full price because you have these reference points, the Baldur's Gates. That's why I say that these different companies, they hate Larian, because when they set a standard, it makes the rest of these guys look terrible. I remember with Destiny 2, which is not a game I've got any interest in, but I remember hearing about when they build content, they purposely make it middling because they don't want to get expectations too high. If they produce something of incredible quality, and then the next content update isn't as good, people are going to criticize them. So instead, they always keep it middling, so people just go, yep, that was as good as last time, this is all A-okay, I'm enjoying it. That's what the video game industry wants, just total rubbish. That's what the video game industry wants. Mediocrity that you accept, that you pay full price for. Even if you don't, they're crammed with microtransactions anyway, so to get the full experience, you've got to spend a lot of money. Larian aren't having that. It's great to see them talking out about it, and I can't wait to see what they do next. They've mentioned the next game will probably have early access, so who knows, maybe in 2-3 years we'll be able to experience some big act of their next game. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.